Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bass, and today we've got our post ICAST gear review. The largest show of the year has passed, and an incredible amount of new products have come to market, from hard baits to soft baits to terminal, rods, reels, you name it. Today we're taking a look at the best of the best. I am so excited to walk through this stuff with you guys. You know how much we love doing gear reviews. Tim and I are tackle fanatics ourselves. We love geeking out on new gear. ICAST this year, if you're not familiar, that's the largest trade show in bass fishing. It happens every year. That's where a lot of the new products for the year are launched, and this year it was absolute fire. There was so much good stuff at that show. We have narrowed it down to this pile right here. I mean, this is truly the gems, the best of the best. And there's a lot of things we kicked out. The list was just too long. Some of it we had to bump to a gear review we'll do next month. Just so we had more time with it, where some of those things that we really need to get to know, put a bunch of time on the water, test it, try to break it, that stuff. There's so much even in today's video that we're going to have to split it. So we're going to do a bonus video for you tomorrow. Today, we're covering baits, terminal tackle, all that stuff. Tomorrow, bonus video, we'll do rods and reels. I mean, it's that big. There was that much good stuff to come out of the show. I was super impressed. It was my favorite ICAST that I've ever been to. It was so chaotic. We basically didn't do anything there. We shot a video with Tackle Warehouse talking about some of the new stuff, but other than that, we didn't even turn a camera on. We just took it in and geeked out on tackle. Let's get this thing started. Right from the top, we're just going to jump into it. If you're not familiar with how these videos work with the gear review, Tim and I have just looked at all the new stuff. These are things that really jumped out at us, and I'll explain why each one jumped out. Some of these things will probably connect with your fishing style, some won't. They're at random. They're from all sorts of different brands, all sorts of different price points. It's just the key things that just jumped out at us. And then in the video description below this video, if you open that up, we link every single one of these straight to Tackle Warehouse, where you can take a look at it, see colors, sizes, price, all that stuff. So we don't have to jump into all that. But for any bait, we'll give you our personal favorite colors, favorite sizes, everything. To kick this thing off, we're going to let's start with hooks, that sort of stuff. Then we'll jump into, you know, hard baits, swim baits, then we'll get into the soft baits. To kick this thing off from Dirty Jigs, this is one of the things that I am most amped up about to come out of that show. They have come out with a new version of the guppy head. The guppy head is one of our favorite heads that we've ever used. We use it for almost everything. They have now come out with a Tungsten HD guppy head. HD being heavy duty. So the guppy head is a finesse hook. We use it for everything from rolling 2.8 Kitex and 2.75 swammers to strolling, all sorts of things. We do a lot with the guppy head. A heavy duty version is amazing. So Tungsten head, when they did this revamp, they were not playing around. So they've gone tungsten resin on the head. The hook keeper has, the bait keeper has changed. You might recognize this bait keeper from Tim and I's mini underspin that we designed with Dirty Jigs. They brought that bait keeper over to the HD guppy because it works so well. And then they went to this heavier wire hook. So the standard guppy comes in a 1/0 and a 3/0 light wire. This is coming at you in a 2/0 heavy wire. You can still absolutely set this thing on 5 or 6 pound fluoro, but now you're talking about a hook where you can jump up to 10 or 12 pound and not bend it out. So an absolutely amazing 1-2 punch. Everything from, you know, like forward facing sonar type baits to slow rolling swim baits. This was needed. To be honest, back in the day when the guppy head first came out, the very first guppy head, I begged for it to have this hook in this size. Begged for it. And it didn't happen. The guppy that we all know and love came out instead. So to be all these years forward, see it revamped, see another version of the guppy, and to see that hook, That tells you how pumped I am. I mean, I've wanted this thing forever. If you're around bigger fish, little heavier line, you want to lean on those fish, Tungsten HD Guppy is awesome. Next up from Hayabusa. There's no question at this show, there was a lot of Bait Finesse stuff. There was a lot of jig and minnow type stuff, strolling, hover strolling, mid strolling, bottom strolling. That category's erupting, right? So there was a lot of that stuff there. From Hayabusa, we see a true hover hook. So weightless hook. This is designed for true mid strolling. The guy who wants to thread that into his plastic, add tiny little nail weights, a 196, a 132nd, a 332nd, to be able to mid stroll on super light line. There's a handful of good hook options on the market, but they cannot keep them in stock. So another really good one is absolutely welcome. We need more options because they're just, all of them sell out. So I was really excited to see that Hayabusa brought over that D-striker right there. Super solid option for that hover strolling type fishing. Now this right here won its category at the show. This box is insane. One of the coolest things to come out of ICAST. This is from BKK. BKK launched a whole pile of new hook shapes. They really put out a bunch of really good dialed in bass hooks. Everything from treble hooks for jerk baits to little BFS hooks, drop shot hooks, you name it, okay? That's one thing. The other thing they did was completely change storage. This is wild. So this box right here, when I open this up, this box comes loaded. These are full. All their new hook shapes, all the super cool bass stuff that they've been working on, it comes loaded. So you can buy this box loaded. It is not inexpensive. I mean, it's loaded. It's a ton of hooks. You're going to pay for that, right? But it's everything you could need. Standard, like nose hook drop shots, weedless drop shots, treble hooks, wide gaps, round bends, weighted twist lock hooks, you name it. It's everything that you could need in one box. But here's the cool part. They also sell just the box, empty, and then they sell all these little boxes, all the little fill-ins, they sell them empty with a blank label. So it doesn't just have to be BKK hooks. If there's some BKKs you love, but there's a Owner or a Gamakatsu or a Hayabusa or whatever, you can add those. You can buy the little boxes, pack your hooks in them, label them, and drop them in here. So you've got across the top for those smaller boxes, drop shot hooks don't take as much space as a wide gap or a round bend, right? So you've got different sizes. You can mix and match the way you want, or if you just want a one-stop shop, know that you've got a hook for everything. They did it for you. In the video description, we'll link all three. We'll link you the complete box, the empty box, and then the empty fill-ins that you can put your hooks in and drop them in as well. But I think that is so cool. It's one thing to come out with new hook shapes, which they did, like some of these. Let me pull the Permalock. Let me pop this open. You gotta see this one. They brought some super innovative stuff. Like here we're talking an EWG style, like screw lock type hook. Only on this screw lock, the weight is built into the screw itself. Plus it's got fluorocarbon barbs on it. I mean, they just did some things that are completely different, but not just to the hooks. They made a huge leap forward in hook storage as well. Nice work, BKK. They knocked that one out of the park. All right, let's start jumping into hard baits. Let's start with Topwater, and we're just going to work our way down from there. These are in no particular order. First one up from Jackal, we've got the riser bait. The riser is one of those baits that has a cult following. There are a handful of places in the country where these baits are the deal Everybody knows it. No one says a word. There's just some baits that are like that. But that bait, they've needed some new colors. This one in particular, the riser bait in straight up chrome. You guys know who you are. East Tennessee guys, mountain guys, blueback herring guys. That is the deal. This needed to happen. I was so pumped to see that at the show. The riser bait, this is a topwater bait, straight retrieve. You fish it fast, and that nose is just slinging water as it's burning across the surface, and schooling fish just come unglued for it. If you've never given it a try, it's a super cool bait. It'll cast a mile, but you can still fish it on finesse tackle. Super cool. So excited to see that coming in some new colors. Next one up from Bill Lewis. This is called the Zigzag. This is a front runner. Again, it's one of those things where you either know exactly what this is or you're completely clueless. Front runners also have a cult following. There have been a handful of front runners to come to market through the years. For whatever reason, they've gone out of stock, they've gone out of business, whatever it is, they've been discontinued. I can tell you flat out, Tim and I have each bought up cases of original front runners. I'm talking, I have cases of them. We fish front runners a lot. PH Customs came out with a custom balsa front runner a few years ago. Always sold out. Well, now we see a mainstream company coming from Bill Lewis, the Zigzag. We've got a mainstream company bringing a front runner back. The concept here, the front runner is designed to be tied in front of a topwater walking bait. We'll get to this bait next, but here's our walking bait, okay? You tie this 10 to 12 inches in front. So your main line comes to the nose of the front runner. Then you have a short leader from the back of the front runner to the walking bait. You need to be careful with your leader length. Trust me, 10 to 12 inches. When you do that properly, you are now fishing two baits that walk opposite of each other. The idea is that when you're on schooling fish, I don't do this year round. I do this when fish are aggressive, when they're schooling, when they're feeding, when they're chasing. How many times have you caught fish on a walking bait and either you've got one on and another one's up there trying to take it from him, or you've got it on and there's 12 more spotted bass chasing, they're all fighting, but your bait doesn't have a hook in it. You've already got that fish hooked. I see it a lot when I'm like fluke fishing too, where I'll have the fish on, the fluke will slide up the line, and other bass are trying to eat it, and there's no hook in it. It's brutal. That's what a front runner was designed for. So this stays out in front. It's got a great walk to it, but once you hook up, you now have a small bait that's getting dragged all around in the chaos with a treble hook on it. And it is amazing how often that turns into a double hookup. It's awesome. I have never, not one time, had a fish come up and smoke the front runner in front of the topwater. They always eat the topwater first. They always eat the one in the back. But I can't count the number of times that I've had another fish come up and smoke that front runner. So cool. And I'm really glad to see that coming back onto the mainstream market where people can really take advantage of that and use it, because we use them a lot. Next up, that walking bait. From Rapala, this is the Jowler. Super cool topwater bait. It's got this big cupped face, and it throws a lot of water. I have been extremely impressed with this bait. Comes with perfect hooks on it already. Nothing about this bait needs to be changed. Pop that pack open, pull it out, tie it on, and send it. I've got excellent cast distance in this bait. Colors look awesome. The action is really good. You can walk it, you can pop it. When you work it hard, it throws an incredible amount of water. I have been creaming fish on this from the moment I got my hands on it. Super good colors. The very first fish I caught on it choked it, which I almost never have happen to a walking bait. They almost always have it T-boned, but the first one had it down the hatch. Just full commitment to that thing. That was very, it might have been random, but I mean, my momentum went to the roof. I'm like, Yeah, it's as good as I thought it was, because I'm looking at the action. I'm like, this bait's good, man. They're gonna eat this. And then, and it's just down the hatch. Just, it's been on deck ever since. What can I say? Super cool bait, super cool colors. They did a great job. One more topwater for you. From Snag Proof, this is called the Zoo Wake. Now, what on earth is that? That is one wonky looking bait right there, right? I don't know how many of you remember, way back in the day, Snag Proof used to make a bait called a wiggle wog, okay? This is a reinvented wiggle wog. It's a frog, okay? So it's a hollow body, weedless bait. It'll collapse. What's the deal? Okay, so here is the deal. The wiggle wog was one of my babies. I threw that thing non-stop on the California Delta. When everybody else was frogging, I was wiggle wogging. Fish is exactly like a frog, but every time I would get to a hole in the cheese, it wakes across it. That paddle tail's back there kicking. Looks like a surface swim bait as you come across every little open patch. Then you frog it across the cheese, reel it across the open. Frog it. I used to mess fish up on that thing. Now, the wiggle wog was not perfect. I had to do all sorts of things to get a better hookup ratio out of it. But this thing, straight out the gate, completely different hook. Super long hook point on this thing. I mean, they knew what their issues were. They obviously took a crack at fixing all of them in one go. Super cool bait. This is one that, like, if you don't have that history, you see this on a shelf, you're like, what is that? But I have the history. I saw this thing, went straight into the booth and was like, that one, check that out. That thing is awesome. Had to look at it right away. Super stoked about this. This is one of my personal favorites to come out of the show because of all the history I have, and I see the handful of things, my hookup ratio issues, the hooks I used to have to change, they're all done. Like they fixed it. Super cool. All right. Let's go here from Bait Sanity. We've got a wild jerkbait. Bait Sanity is known for glide baits, big swim baits, that sort of thing. But they've been dabbling more and more in traditional size baits as well. But every single thing that they've put out has some crazy innovation to it. They're doing something completely different than everyone else. And this is no exception to that. This jerkbait, very, very different. I'm gonna show you right out the gate. I'm gonna push this over and I'm gonna push this down. And what I just did is pull the rattles out of that bait. So here's the deal. This is the jerkbait, 3-hook bait, comes with some nasty BKK hooks on it, ready for battle, super cool bait. It comes with 4 different, and this cool little case to hold them, 4 different weights. So we've got one that has 1 bead in it, one that's got a handful of beads, one that's got a lot of beads, and one that's a solid chunk of lead. The deal is, you can put the lightest one in here. Oh, I put it in backwards. My bad. There we go. Pop that in there. The lightest one is jerkbait floats. You can switch them out. You can get it to suspend. You can get it to fast sink. So whether you want to fish a traditional jerkbait, whether you're trying to match changes in water temperature where normally we have to adjust hooks. You guys know I'm fanatical about jerkbaits. I've got a gram scale and I'm weighing hooks and split rings to get my baits to perfectly suspend in the wintertime when the water's cold. Now you can just pop these things in and out to get as close as possible. And if you're a guy who is using forward-facing sonar, you're trying to get a jerkbait down deep, you want to count it down, you can go to that heavy one, pop this out, take that heavy one, slide it in, and now you're sinking to get down to those fish. Super cool concept. All right, next up, from Duo Realis. Now, let me add also, some of these things, a lot of these things are available for pre-order. That's just the way it is with ICAST. Some things are available right away. Some things may not come out till October, November, but you find out about them and you can pre-order them. But some of these things are totally in stock right now and you can get them. I honestly can't even keep track of which are which. That's why we put the links in the description. You can click on them. You'll be able to see if they're in stock or if you can pre-order. And if you can pre-order, there's usually an estimated ETA from the manufacturer when they're going to be there. But it's pretty normal to have like a 1 to 3 month wait on the backside of ICAST or something. Sometimes with rods and reels, you're waiting 6 months plus because they're just announcing it now, but the stuff comes later. But again, some of these things, like the Heartbee, they're available right now. You can get them. This is a wild bait. This is from Duo Realis called the Heartbee. This is in the Spybait family. Okay, Duo Realis, very well known for the spin bait. This Heartbee is a similar concept. It looks like a popper, right? This is a sinking bait. Water can come through the cupped face and it comes out the belly. When it does so, it passes by this blade, which will spin. Couple that with this tail, just super stretchy, some sort of elastomer material. That tail back there giving it different action, and you have a very different look at a spybait. Now, this was designed with eye motion in mind. There's a lot of eye motion baits, baits that essentially do very little in the water. They just sort of come through the water. It's something that has taken off in Japan and has lasted for years. Those fish are super pressured. Guys use a lot of eye motion baits and they call fish up with them. That style of fishing does not leap out at me. If all I could do with this bait is throw it out and just slow crawl it, and it would just have a tiny little bit of wobble, tiny little blade, and a little bit of kick back here, it would not have made the cut in this video. But I took this thing and just started fiddling with it. What else can this thing do? It's got to do something besides eye motion. It's got a pretty good twitch. It bounces around pretty good, subsurface. And I have been playing with it super aggressive, like pop, 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 just fishing it super aggressive underwater. Now it doesn't have like a dialed in walk the dog or anything like that. It's all over the place. You never know where it's gonna go. But the combination of that thing darting and then that elastomer tail back there curly cueing its way behind, it's a pretty cool action. Very different bait than anything else I've seen, and I really like the size. Still very small, but approaching more of that traditional size. So like bigger than a small BFS bait, smaller than a standard bait. It's just sort of floating there in the middle, and I really like that size. Super cool bait that I will be playing with more and more myself. All right, next up, spoons. We've got a couple here. You might recognize these. The Duh Spoon, made by Blade Runner, is an amazing spoon. Arguably, especially if you argued with me, the best jigging spoon ever made. In my opinion, that is a hands down statement, not an opinion. Just an unbelievable jigging spoon. These things are incredible. They come in 3 sizes. So this body shape comes in 2 sizes. This one comes in 1 size. Just an amazing bait. Made by Blade Runner, now licensed by Nichols Lures, the makers of the best flutter spoons on the market. Rather than going out and taking somebody else's idea, trying to tune it just enough to be legit and get away with it and not make waves, they did the right thing. They went to Blade Runner, they licensed the Duh Spoon. Why try and fix something that's already dialed, right? Take the best spoon and add to it. So Nichols now makes the Duh Spoon, and they did all the little things that we do to them, so now you don't have to. They add the swivel for you. They add a super nice Flashaboo feathered treble on there, super nice hook on it, just dialed straight out of the pack. So we have thrown the Duh Spoon forever, and we'll continue to do so. I think it's awesome that Nichols licensed that, took the time to dial in the little modifications that we all make to it anyway, just save you the time and energy. I think that was a great move and something I applaud. I love when we see two different brands in this industry work together instead of people just trying to cut each other off at the knees, right? Bass fishing is a small community, and I think it's awesome when things are done right. Next up, we've got this guy right here from Jackal. This is not a flutter spoon, though it looks like one. They call this the counterback spoon. This spoon is designed not to do a flutter, but to drift back. So it's a bait that you can fish around brush piles. You can fish it around docks. Throw that thing out, work it, and then when you let it go, it's going to drift back. So you can pull it up over a brush pile and send it back to it. Pull it away from them, send it back to it. You can throw it up against a dock and let it go back up under that dock. The only other company I've seen do something like this is River to Sea. A few years ago, they developed a spoon that could suck back underneath things as well. But between that one, the River to Sea and this, they're night and day different. The River to Sea is smaller, completely different profile. The Jackal is a little bit larger size, super detailed paint schemes on these too. There's, I don't know, 7 or 8 colors, and every single one of them is a color where I'm like, that was well thought out. Straight out of the pack, 100%, ready to fish, super cool spoon. It's still got some flutter to it. It's not like this thing's shooting like a bullet, but it's going back as it's doing it. And that is such a neat concept and definitely worth a try. All right, next up, we've got a chatterbait. From Z-Man, we've got the Tungsten Chatterbait Elite Evo. This also happens to be my favorite color. So here's the deal. The Evo, killer chatterbait, right? We all know that. It smashes. So does the Jackhammer. Both amazing, amazing chatterbaits. Oh, got a big old helicopter flying by right here. Now, they've taken that same Evo head design and they've done it in a true tungsten head. The result is a super hard thumping chatterbait. I was shocked at how much harder this hits. It's louder in the water and it's way more vibration in your hand. So I'm talking like the drawing power of a big blade chatterbait, but in the size profile of a standard chatterbait. This is awesome. They did a fantastic job on this thing. Murkier water, fish that are used to seeing a chatterbait. You want to show them something different. You want to hit harder in murky water. This thing is night and day different than the other chatterbaits with that lead head on them. The tungsten is a whole different ball game and absolutely worth a look. They did a really good job on this. I'm very impressed. Z-Man, we're about to talk about a handful of Z-Man baits in a row. I mean, they have brought absolute fire to ICAST this year. They won several awards. They've knocked it out of the park. All right, next up, this is from Savage Gear. Savage Gear has now come out with a soft Shine Glide. Super cool bait. So your line goes through the nose, and then you tie that to this wire, to your hook, and then that kind of clips into the belly there. And the result is that you have a single treble and it hangs down. This bait is legit. I am very, very impressed by this thing. Soft glide baits, the last year or two have been booming, right? That's no secret. This bait in particular, if you try to like super slow roll it, it's not there, it won't do it. You've got to put a little speed on it. But as soon as you put the speed on it, it's super erratic, like very, very aggressive swim, very gizzard shad-like. If you've seen gizzards or other big bait fish, you know how they're super darty, they're always moving, they're always going fast. This is the best imitator of a gizzard shad's actual movement that I've personally seen. And that says a lot. I mean, I play with everything that comes out. Now, I have not put enough time into this bait to say, hey, I've caught dozens of fish on this. I haven't done that yet, right? We're just after ICAST. I've played with the bait. I've spent a day on the water with it, but I haven't put months into this thing yet. So this is more of a first look. But I can tell you when I put some English on this, so you can like medium retrieve it and it's swimming, but I'm telling you, the magic is when you put some English on it, play with this bait, work that handle. This thing will dart, like I can't even imitate it with my hands. It is so all over the place. It looks more like a gizzard shad making a run for it than anything I've ever seen. It is incredible. Again, it's a single treble hook that's going to be free hanging on the chin, line up through the chin. So when you hook them, bait slides up, you're fighting them on just the treble hook. But the action on this bait is truly, truly remarkable. All right, one more swim bait. From Z-Man, we've got the Shadtron LT. Comes in a 4-inch and a 6-inch. This is the 6-inch. This bait won its category at the show as well. And frankly, I don't even know if people understood what they were looking at and how cool this bait really is when it was in that new product showcase winning an award. This is a line through bait, but it's a line through to a jig hook. So that nasty jig hook right there, beastie hook, comes out of the top of that bait. So you go line through the top of the nose, comes out the back, tie your jig hook on, and then you thread it down in there and it locks into place. This concept is already proven. Z-Man came out with the Mulletron, I don't know, a year or two ago. Awesome mullet imitating bait. Comes in some super cool shad colors, and frankly, I've throttled them on it. I have caught some really good fish on the Mulletron. But, I mean, there's so many good baits on the market. There are baits that are niche-y. There's baits that do a lot of things well. So we haven't actually even gotten around to talking about that Mulletron, really, before they came out with the Shadtron. So this concept is already proven. I've blasted them on it, but now we've got it in a true shad profile. That stretchy material, this thing will take an absolute beating. I think this is a killer. And obviously, everyone at the show agreed since it won. Such a neat bait. All right, with that, let's talk the minnow type baits. And what I mean by that is your strolling baits. There were probably 20, 30 plus minnow type baits that came out at the show. I heard a lot of people say that it was a forward facing show, or it was a minnow show. Jig and minnow, that's the only thing that came out at ICAST. Obviously those people were blind, right? I saw so much cool stuff come out at this show. And I mean, this is the cream on top. You want to talk about products, it goes on for days, but this is the really good stuff. This is the stuff that just blew Tim and I away. But in that minnow category, if we took every one of those minnows and threw them at a dartboard, the vast majority of them are right there in the middle, right? I don't really care about those. I don't care about the ones that are just like everything else. What I'm looking for is those outliers. The ones that hit the outer edge of that dartboard, the ones that are different. Those are the baits I want to see. What stands out from the crowd? I've got 4 baits here that were tangibly different. Each one of them did something that spoke to us. The first one from Z-Man is this bait here called the Graph Shads. Now, I actually already have a bunch of history with this bait. The Graph Shads is super cool. I've got one sitting here out of pack, so I can show it to you. The way this bait works is you go through the top of the head, and then you tie your line to the chin. See that line tie hiding down there? Comes with 2 tails. Let me pull that off there so you can really see it. So through the head, tie to the chin. The result is that the bait is super, super stable. I mean, it really wants to sit perfectly upright in the water. A lot of times when I'm strolling, you know, we're launching baits out to fish, and we'll get more into this strolling thing. We've done dedicated videos on strolling already. We will do more for you. We'll do one really soon. Like I don't know, next couple of weeks, we'll get you a full-blown strolling video with some of the most common baits that we're blasting them on, not just some of these outliers that are brand new. But that method of fishing, the jig and minnow, moping, the Damiki rig, the Cindy rig, whatever you want to call it, there's so many different names for this general concept that has been taking over tournament fishing. The only bummer is that it's been attached to the war on forward-facing sonar, right? There's people who love forward-facing, there's people who hate it. And the jig and minnow thing, which really is not a jig and minnow, that's just the generic term that pros all put on it so that they don't have to say what they're throwing. At least that's what I think. But that whole category, they got attached to each other because that's what a lot of those pros are doing on forward-facing. I couldn't care less about any of that. This concept, strolling, you do not need forward facing for that. It works from shore. It absolutely works on a bass boat with no electronics at all. I'm using this thing in places I would throw a chatterbait. I'm throwing over the top of grass flats, just blindly fishing, throwing up to the bank, working it out of pockets. Once in a while, something comes along. The 2.8 Kitech, the Senko, the A-Rig, right? These things come along that for a time, bass cannot resist. For whatever reason, it triggers something in them and they lose their minds. This is one of those things. And I hate that it got attached to the forward-facing thing because guys who don't want anything to do with that haven't even considered that this thing might blast their fish for them standing on the bank. I'm trying to make that separation for you right now because I want you to hear about these 4 baits. So with all of that, let's get into this first one again. The graph shads. The crazy thing about the graph shads is I had no idea what this bait was. I had a buddy who had this and I got to fish with it and I wrecked shop with it. Didn't know what it was, didn't know what its name was, no clue. We get to ICAST, see this thing and I'm like, that's that bait. I have wrecked them on that bait, but I didn't know what it was. So this thing is called the graph shads. I've throttled them on it. And I mean big ones. It's super stable, so you can get it to dance. But I've noticed that with this bait, here's what makes it the outlier, right? I wanted to talk about the ones that are different. I have found that this thing shines when I barely work it. Like I'm fishing and I see those fish on 2D sonar, straight down, just regular old sonar. You see the arch under the boat? Those fish never bite. Back in the day, they used to bite, but they got conditioned. They never bite. I let this thing fall down vertical. Because of that line tie, it sits dead straight in the water. And then when I bump it and I'm just barely working it, this tail just starts dancing. They eat it. I mean, these fish that don't eat anything, dong, there they are. Or I'll be working it and it just goes slack on me and you just lift up. Yep, there he is. I've caught a bunch of big ones, not just throwing it out, counting it down, and just mid-strolling. I've caught them that way too, but I've caught some good ones just barely fishing it. Just letting that thing dance just above the bottom. Similar to like how I would work a drop shot, honestly, but this thing is just floating in the water column. It's got to be how realistic it looks and the fact that it hovers so dead flat. It's not hanging there looking silly. It looks perfect. And they're on it. Major standout. The next one from Rapala, Crush City, the Mooch Minnow. My understanding is that this thing has won more tournament money than like any bait that's ever not been released. So like before it was even released, the thing has made hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know about all that. What I do know is that I got my hands on a pack and Tim and I went out fishing and we messed them up. We messed them up when the bite was off, when we had no flow on the river. They weren't aggressive. We should not have been able to catch them. We were throwing other things. They weren't eating it. We put this little guy on and just started getting into them. It's an elastomer type material, so it's going to last. It's got this cool little tail on it, very different, but the result is that when you're strolling, it's got just enough action back there that it's doing something different and the fish blast on it. This one is an outlier because of the results that we've already had with it. I mean, it has flat caught them and it's caught them in a bunch of conditions. I've been throwing this on the guppy head, not the new one, not the tungsten guppy, because I didn't have those, but on the regular guppy head in a 1/4 ounce with a 1/0 hook. That's been the deal for this bait. Next one up, from Great Lakes Finesse. We've got this little bait called a hover minnow. And if you see this thing on Tackle Warehouse, you see a side profile, it doesn't look like much. It'll just slip by, right? Middle of that dartboard, middle of the pack, you won't even know it's different. But when I pull this thing out, I'll show you what's different. This hover minnow, one, it's small. It's got a little forked tail that sits horizontal in the water. But here's the deal. Can you see the shape to the belly? The belly is cupped in a big way. Hopefully if I turn it enough ways, one of them will allow you to see it. It's a cupped belly. That causes this thing to glide. So there's two things here that make this bait stand out for me. One is that when you're strolling with it, if you're like bottom strolling just above bottom and you want to stall it, when it comes to a stop on the bottom, it just sits there. It just glides in and parks. Sits perfectly every time because it's got that wide body that just comes in and just lands. I'm picturing Great Lakes, right? Great Lakes Finesse, that's probably why I'm picturing that. But seriously, smallmouth fishing, clear water fishing, anytime you're being super subtle, like wintertime fishing, you stall that thing out and it just comes in there and lands perfectly. Those fish come in and smoke that thing. But what really makes this bait stand out for me, what really makes it tangibly different, Tim has shot a couple of videos through the years talking to you guys about the way that we used to secretly fish a lot, where we would make spiral baits, baits that would spiral to bottom. Tim used to get these custom hooks poured, super lightweight hooks. We'd thread them. There were a couple of different baits we would use. Robo-worm made a sculpin that was my personal favorite. They still make it. But when you would thread them on, you'd have to thread them a little crooked. And the result is that when you throw them out and you slack them, they don't just go to bottom. They would go to bottom in what we call a death spiral. Slow fall. We'd use it under docks. And I'm not talking about little fish. I'm talking giants. Giants that didn't want to eat anything else. We'd fire that in there, kill it, let that spiral bait start doing the death spiral, and you'd see those jumbos just go down out of sight. They'd go down and smoke that thing. This bait does a death spiral on its own. Super cool, super cool. Now, they've got 2 heads that they produce, and I had a buddy tell me that you had to throw it on their head to get the right action out of it. And I didn't try it on like 10 different heads, but I tried it on one other head and I did not get the action. And I used their head and I got the action. So take that for what you will. But they've got 2 styles of head. Their standard head is like, I'm gonna guess that's just eyeballing it, that's probably a 60-degree line tie. Might even be a 90, but it's just all the way forward. Regardless, that's the standard. And then now they've got this little, do they call it a hover head? What do they call it? I don't know what the hanging head, the hanging head. Look at the difference of the eyelet. Do you see that on this one, the eyelet's way out on the tip of the nose. On this one, it's further back, okay? If you're going to be throwing it out there and strolling this thing, really fishing it, you want that eyelet forward. But if you want to fish in deeper water, or like similar to that grass sheds, if you want to fish down under the boat, you absolutely want the one with the line tie pulled back. If that line tie is pulled back, the result is that your bait hangs horizontally in the water. So with a line tie forward, if you stop working it, the bait hangs down, which obviously does not look right to a bass. But when you're fishing it aggressively, that never happens, and you want that line tie forward, it impacts the action. But if you want to fish vertically or you want to fish slow, with that line tie drawn back, that bait will sit level in the water, and that's the deal. That's how you get fish to bite vertically. So 2 very different baits, but both in the minnow category, for lack of a better name. Other than that, nothing about them is even remotely similar, except that they both do an amazing job of hanging vertically and converting fish. All right, one more in this category from Z-Man again. I told you, they brought fire at the show. It was ridiculous. They've got their drop kickers. Two sizes, a little tiny one and then sort of a mid-size. I'll pull out a mid-size so it's a little easier to see here. So the drop kickers is a drop shot bait. Nose hooked drop shot bait. And it's like a little swim bait. It's got this super cool wedge tail on it. So you work that thing on a drop shot, it's got great action. Now, that said, that is not at all what I'm doing with this bait. That's what it was designed for. More power to them. That's not what I'm using it for. I'm doing two things with it. One, you take that 1/4 ounce guppy head I just talked about with a 1/0 hook, threaded in this thing. It's a pretty good little swim bait. It's got that little wedge tail back there. Super subtle, just super tight action. I've caught a bunch of fish doing that. But more than anything, same head, strolling. I have absolutely wasted them on this thing. Just sort of the same category as that mooch minnow, like similar size, the bigger one, sort of similar size profile. And it's just got something else going on the back of that bait that gives the back end of that bait a little bit of motion as well. It's not just that head wobble, you get some motion out of it too. That pairing, like a standard primary action and a little bit of secondary action. Imagine that, secondary action catching fish. How many times have you heard that through the years? That little drop kickers, I know they made it as a drop shot bait, but strolling it is pretty darn good. We're almost there, guys. We got 3 more. All right, next one up. This bait is called the umbrella wire. It's from Rains umbrella wire. This is going to fall into that, for lack of a better term, we'll call it the dice category. We've seen a handful of baits now, you know, the fuzzy dice, little round balls that look like a koosh ball. That category, I see it expanding, but it's not my favorite style of fishing, right? I don't generally fish that slow unless things have gone really wrong. However, I saw underwater footage of this bait on a drop shot and it stopped me in my tracks. Here, it looks crazy, right? So it's a little dice, for lack of a better word. It's a little cube there in the middle. And that cube has a flat piece of like mesh in it. So when you hook a drop shot hook through it, it doesn't just rip right off. You're actually hooking through something. And then each side of the cube has 2 legs. But you essentially wacky rig that on a drop shot. And that whole thing, it's hard to explain. And I don't have the water clarity to show you, but it's different. And it spoke to me. I was very surprised. I mean, a lot of baits in this category look like a koosh ball to me. I'm personally not into it, but this one looked different. It looked really cool, and I was surprised by it. Again, that one is called the umbrella wire by Rains. 2 more baits, and we're going to wrap this thing up. And don't forget that tomorrow, bonus video, completely out of schedule, we'll do another gear review and we'll talk about the rods and reels from ICAST, because there was a bunch of amazing rods and reels, but this video will it'll just flat be too long if we try and do it all today. 2 more baits for you, both of these in that finesse category. Like immediately to me, BFS, Bait Finesse. Ultra light finesse fishing on a bait caster, these baits are going to shine. Of course, you could absolutely crush with spinning rod as well. From Missile Baits, we've got the Micro D-Bomb. So the D-Bomb is a fantastic bait. Missile Baits has had it out for years. Now they've got the little tiny guy. I've already played with this bait. It takes a 1/0 hook perfectly. Takes a size 1 even better. Super cool. It's a great size. The D-Bomb is a proven shape. Ultralight flipping, 1/16 ounce tungsten, little size 1 hook. Put that guy on there and you're flipping on 6 and 7 pound fluoro instead of heavy tackle. You will convert a lot of fish that just can't be caught other ways, but they let their guard down with these little tiny profiles. This color in particular, I think it's Alabama, yeah, Alabama brim. Familiar color, one of my favorite swim jig colors of all time. I thought that this one in particular stood out from the crowd and looked really, really good. And then last but not least, the last bait in this review from Yamamoto, you've got the little covert craw. Check this little dude out. Same deal. In my mind, instant winner on a little BFS setup. Fish that on 6-7 pound fluoro. That's a deadly little bait. The thing I like about this is the Yamamoto baits, they've got a lot of mass to them. So they're heavy, right? They get a lot of salt in them. They're just, it's a heavy plastic, even when it's weightless. You could totally throw this thing weightless on Bait Finesse and you're still gonna be able to send it. Like it's got a little mass to it on its own, but you could still put that on a 1/16 ounce tungsten. The other thing that I do with both of these baits is I've spent a lot of time lately, Z-Man makes a little Ned hook that is an EWG style hook. So a weedless Ned rig, and that pairs up perfectly on these guys too. But a super cool little bait from Yamamoto. Those little tiny claws still have some mass to them, so you get some movement out of them. I really like it. And with that, we wrap up the major standouts. Well, the truth is we don't. The first round of major standouts from ICAST. Tomorrow, we're going to talk rods and reels. We'll do that video for you as well. And then I think next month, probably, we'll do another one of the baits that we either wanted to spend some more time with, or the baits that Tackle doesn't quite have up on their website yet, things that are releasing just after ICAST. There's a bunch more really cool stuff, but this blew my mind. I mean, really good stuff came out of ICAST this year. If you missed that show, you should be at the next one. I was very impressed. Tim and I both had a blast. We saw a lot of really cool stuff. There was a lot of positivity there. The entire industry felt like it was up on an upswing. Everybody was happy. Everybody was innovating. It was really good. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, we'll link everything in the video description for you. We'll give you our favorite sizes, colors, anything relevant like that. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.